Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Let's Talk. We're talking about police brutality. Is our police force in general, too powerful? And is the proposal by the current government, the idea that they would like to hand over more power to our police officers, sound too draconian for the rest of us who love our freedom, who love our right to assemble freely, we love to protest? Conservative Party government, or conservative-led government, is proposing that there should be tighter control on our rights to protest, and of course, police's right to curtail our freedom to counsel protest, especially if they're deemed to be disruptive. I don't understand this, but we want to discuss this and understand what's being proposed, what are the rationale behind these proposals, and we also want to talk about Sarah, who lost her life recently at the hands of a police officer, at least alleged. We don't know the exact nature of the court case yet. There is a case going on in the court, so we can't talk much about it. But we know Sarah Everard has been brutally murdered in Clapham Common. And post her murder, there was a number of vigils and protests that have been organized up and down the country, including the notorious one that was cancelled in Clapham Common. And subsequently, people did gather for the vigil, but the police was very heavy-handed. So much so, our own Home Secretary, Priti Patel, and our London Mayor called independent inquiry into this, the whole handling of the protest or the vigil. Even after a report was submitted by Cressida Dick and her office, we were told by the Home Secretary that she was not satisfied. We want to know all this and more. We want to know if the police officers are too brutal or police force is brutal. And also we want to know if there is something fundamentally wrong with us men, the way we treat women. But that would be more a sub-conversation for today, but a more mainstream conversation for a program in the future. But today, all our guests have been briefed for a program around police brutality, but I do have the right to perhaps veer this conversation depending on how we get responses. Let's introduce to you our guests. Hasina Mumtaz, who is former media advisor to Boris Johnson in the Mayor's office. Hasina, welcome to our program.
Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for inviting me on.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you for joining us. We also have been joined by Fajli Bibi, campaigner and entrepreneur. Fajli, salam alaikum and welcome to our program. Can you hear us, Fajli? Okay, sorry, Fajli is not here. She's going to join us later on. Sorry about that. Then we've got Salma Ahmad, who is Momentum National Coordination in the Momentum National Coordination Group. Salma Ahmad, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Good to see you.
Fantastic, fantastic. We have also been, we'll also be joined by Councillor Dawn, who is from the Lib Dems, and she's going to be joining us. She's going to be joining us very soon, but when they do join, I will introduce them to you. Let's go to Hasina Mumtaz. Hasina, you used to work for the Mayor's office, obviously for Boris Johnson's office. Our Mayor, current Mayor, Sadiq Khan, has expressed his disquiet over the way the police has handled the protest or the vigil in Clapham Common. What do you have to say about that?
So just to clarify, I was in the Mayor of London's press office for 9 years. I first advised Ken Livingstone for 5 years, and then I advised Boris Johnson for 4 years. And of those 9 years, about 7 years were actually spent, my portfolio was crime and policing and anti-terrorism. So I worked very closely with the Met Police, I worked very closely with the Home Office and other actors in that space. As you've mentioned, can I just start actually by saying how deeply saddened I am that another woman has been killed. And if we look at the statistics, a woman is killed by a man every 3 days. And on that day, it was Sarah. And, you know, my deepest condolences to her family. Like everybody else, for a number of reasons, which I'm sure we'll talk about, I'm very shocked, not least because it's a police officer that's been arrested for her murder. As you mentioned, so Sadiq Khan has had meetings with Cressida Dick and some of the other senior officers, and he's said that he's not satisfied with the explanation they've given. Now, this relates specifically to the vigil, which got out of hand and escalated very, very quickly for a number of reasons. So he said it's unacceptable. Boris has said the same thing, as has Priti Patel, as have other people. So he's had a meeting with them, and what's happened now is that there's going to be an investigation to look at why, you know, what happened, why the situation escalated, and obviously what learnings can be taken from that. So that's kind of where we are with that situation in terms of your question.
Thank you.
He's made his position.
So that's the story behind it. Well, I understand that. I wanted to find out your opinion. Do you think the police officers were brutal, were heavy-handed, and were behaving disproportionately in managing a vigil?
Yeah, look, I think it's a very challenging situation for both sides, depending on whichever side you are. Do I feel that they had the right to turn up and show their support for Sarah's family, to show how shocked they were and how strongly the sentiments are around these issues? Yeah, I think it's a moment where we, and when I say we, I mean women, needed an outlet to show how we felt about this situation. At the same time, you have an organization who is there to enforce the laws, who is there to ensure public safety, and obviously we'll debate that in the context of who's been arrested, but who is fundamentally there to ensure public safety. So it's you know, you have two very opposing forces. I, like other people, were shocked when I saw the footage of, I think it was, her name's Patsy Stevenson, one of the protesters, being held on the ground by a number of police officers.
How many police officers does it take? It sounds like a joke now. How many police officers does it take to arrest a protester? In Patsy's case, I think about what, 9 or 10?
Yeah, well, this is exactly what I was just going to say. Did it lead that level of restraint by the police to hold down one woman? My personal opinion is no, I don't think it did. Officers there would have made a decision based on whatever intel they had, whatever they perceived as the threat to the officers, to the threat to Patsy herself, and to the threat to others around there, which is very hard for me to comment on because I wasn't there. I'm not part of operational policing or their procedures. But if you look at it through the lens of me, an ordinary person, a woman, sitting here, seeing that on my TV, yes, I do think it was disproportionate.
Okay, well, let's go over to our other guest who has kindly joined us, and that is Solma Ahmed. Solma Ahmed, you are from Momentum National Coordination Group, and I'm assuming you can speak on behalf of the Labour Party. Isn't it the very same Labour Party that said it would abstain from voting against the government bill or voting altogether because it did not have a clear stance, which is what Labour Party has been doing for too long. And now they've changed their mind again, and now they're going to vote against. They're not going to be voting. They're not going to be staying. They're not going to be abstaining. We heard this from the Shadow Justice Secretary, David Lammy, and many other members of the party did not even know about it until he announced it in one of the media interviews. So, Solma, what do you say about police brutality, and what do you say about Labour Party flip-flopping between not knowing where to stand on these issues?
Mashrur, thank you. Firstly, can I say my background is I used to work in Tower Hamlets for God knows how many years, and I particularly worked with domestic violence women. And I actually set up 2 women's refuges in Tower Hamlets and 1 family counseling service for women suffering domestic violence. Now, your question about the Labour Party, can I say, I was waiting. I was expecting the parties to say abstain again. And every moment I was waiting to see what the reaction of my party would be after Sarah Abbott's murder. And let me say, Sarah Abbott's murder affects every single woman and mothers around the country. I have a daughter working in London, and I phone her every night to make sure she's reached home. And my mother used to do that to me when I worked in London. She used to phone me every evening. Now, why do we as women, have to be afraid of going out of our house each and every time? So now that's the question. I would like to come back to that later on. On my party, I was delighted to hear they were going to vote against the bill, because this bill is fundamental to our rights, our freedom to protest, our right around democracy. Police don't need any more power. I'm sorry. This whole spy cop thing. What did it tell us? And this woman, she was murdered by police. We are supposed to trust the police and trust the whole service of a police service. What happened in Clapham Common?
Are you saying that our police officers are being irresponsible?
Sorry, say that again?
Are you saying our police officers were irresponsible?
In Clapham Common?
Yes.
Yes, they were.
But what do you say to the police officers? What do you say to the police officers who are saying we're only implementing COVID-19 restrictions? This is the law. You can't gather. We have banned your vigil. You should not be here. Why did you come out in the first place?
Well, the thing is, the COVID, that whole pandemic thing has been used to shut down our democracy, to shut down our protest. I do understand.
How is our democracy being shut down? Police officers are only trying to protect you and me from spreading COVID. And of course, COVID-19 has taken the lives of many of our loved ones. Why are you saying police officers are compromising on our democracy by enacting the law?
This was a peaceful thing that women, and women were feeling at that time. It was a vigil, simple vigil, and they put on masks. They followed the COVID rule. Okay, not around how they're supposed to protest during that time. This was they should have been more sensitive to the feelings of women.
I understood that.
Every one of us are affected by that murder. Every single woman will tell you how they were affected, whether they were sitting on armchairs or out in the Clapham Common.
Okay, thank you. Let's go over to Hasina Mumtaz. Hasina Mumtaz, I don't understand. Why did the woman decide to go onto this vigil when it was made very clear that they should not be going out? COVID-19 restriction applies to everybody, man, woman, and everyone. Doesn't matter even if you're angry and upset about something. I'm afraid you can't come out. People have lost their loved ones and couldn't go and see their own mother or father who passed away, could not attend them when they were sick. Why would it be different for a vigil?
Yeah, and I take on board what you say. But I think, it's what the other sister said. Women, from when we're young, I have never ever gone out to an event without 2 things. First of all, thinking before anything else how I'm going to get back home safely. It's always there in my consciousness. And the second thing is, without saying to friends, make sure you text me when you get home. And they say the same thing to me. Why is it that the onus is on women for their safety when it's not other women attacking women, it's men attacking women? But why is the onus always on women to ensure our safety in situations where we cannot ensure our safety? That's the first thing. The second thing, and kind of partly in response to your question, is because of these simmering sentiments, which are always on the boil, they're always, happening around us in society where these conversations are taking place. Make sure you text me when you get home. You think about where you park your car. You think about the last train and how you're going to get home, And then what happened with Sarah, I think, brought all of that to the boil. And people felt that they needed, as I said, to show solidarity with what's happening with Sarah. And they clearly, the women who came out, and look, Kate Middleton was there, right? Women who came out felt, what else can they do? They can't go into Parliament and put their concerns there and there in the moment. They can't go and have a meeting with Boris Johnson. They can't go and meet with the Mayor of London or Priti Patel. So they did what they felt was right. They felt this was the only way that they could voice their concerns. And I think that's why they were there.
Do you think, therefore, the Conservative Party's motion to grant our police officers more rights to decide whether we can or we cannot hold marches and demonstrations, and police officers would have the right and the authority to decide it should be cancelled? Do you think that's the right move?
I don't know that there isn't really it's a right move or a wrong move answer here. This is a bill that's obviously been in train, and it's Sarah's murder that's brought it. This is probably a debate. This kind of debate is or bill is always controversial, but I think it's had so much prominence because of what's happened. And there have been arguments on both sides of the House. There have been arguments from the police as to why they need these powers. So you probably know that over 150 organizations, including, human rights organizations like Liberty, Unite the Union, other organizations have opposed it, and the Labour Party have opposed it. And you did mention something that fundamentally, there was a fundamental change in Keir Starmer's position where he told his MPs not just to abstain against the bill, but to actually actively vote against it. And that was a change in position by the Labour Party.
But why does Labour Party do this? Labour Party is supposed to be a strong opposition to what we call a draconian anti-liberty type of legislation that the government is bringing up. And yet Keir Starmer decides to take a very pro-anti-liberty position as well, and so asides the government, and only because how the public would perceive him, he has decided to now ask his party members to vote against it.
Well, as the leader of the party, he has a right to do that. I don't think, as far as I know, it's not a three-line whip. But as the leader of the party, he can tell his MPs, he can say to his MPs how he wants them to vote. But I think with all these organizations, and including the Labour Party, why they're opposing it, and where it's, for me personally as well, it feels like that there is a debate to be had here around democracy, is the fact that it gives the Home Secretary, and this is, the Home Secretary of whatever government is in power, the Home Secretary powers to create laws to define serious disruption to communities and organizations. That, to me, causes me really serious concern that an elected MP or a Secretary of State can have those powers. There needs to be a process, to determine. If you want to create laws, you need to go through a process. It shouldn't be that the Home Secretary is given, to me, what seems, and I don't know the detail of it. So
it looks like our Home Secretary has got a lot of power. She can strip, or he can strip a person of their citizenship. They can deny them their right to be in their own homes. And the very same Home Secretary, previous Home Secretaries, including our former Prime Minister, was responsible for creating a hostile environment for anyone who was illegal in this country. I mean, we have a catalogue of grievances against our Home Secretaries, especially the Conservative Party-led Home Secretaries. But that's not our conversation today. Today we're discussing about police officers and their brutality. So we've seen this, and the police brutality we thought was very much at the fore of the conversations over on the other side of the Atlantic in America, but it looks like it's coming here. It's come already in the UK. Police officers have been rather brutal to many people, but now it looks like they've done it to women. Just before we go into a break, I'm going to ask the same question to you. Do you think our Home Secretary has should be supported in her decision to give the police more power, Salma Ahmed?
Of course not. Of course not. You know, she has been, Priti Patel, you know, she has been instrumental in authoritarian government, kind of policies. You've mentioned hostile environment. You know, what's happening to the Black Lives Movement. You know, all of this. You know, she's looking at what Extinction Rebellion and BLM movement has done, and now using that and using the whole pandemic situation.
Salma, just pause there for a second. Sorry to cut you. I've got to take a break. My producer has been telling me to take a break, so I'm going to pause for a minute. And when we come back, inshallah, we'll talk more about police power. But I do want to talk about how men have been the perpetrators of crime and dishonoring our women. And that's why our women, they have to be more vigilant about their safety. The question is why? Don't go too far away. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. Let's Talk in Progress. We're talking about police brutality. But I also want to address the topic of if and why should our women, ladies, be so afraid of going out in the depth of darkness? Why are they worried about their safety? Why are they being brutalized? Why are they facing harassment? A recent survey carried out by YouGov, published in the Guardian newspaper, found the 1,000 women that they interviewed, nearly all of them had suffered some sort of sexual harassment in their life. I felt sick to the core just reading about it. Why do women have to face this? And now, after Sarah has been murdered brutally, a police officer who has been accused of the murder, who is held up in jail, and a court case has begun. We don't know much about it until, of course, the case completes, and we can't talk much about it either. But what we want to know is, do we and have we finally lost all trust on our police forces? And to make things worse, Conservative Party have proposed in a new law to give more power to the police officers, as if we haven't had enough. Police brutality is what we're talking about. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to join us, you can call us. You can share your views, your thoughts. You can challenge us, of course, as well as you can raise your questions to our guests. We have already been joined by two guests earlier, and we have been very fortunate to have the other two who have overcome the technological barriers that the modern Zoom television work poses and have joined us. We've been joined by Fazli Bibi, who's a campaigner and entrepreneur, and we've been joined by Councillor Dawn Barnes, a Lib Dem councillor from Haringey. Let me start by welcoming Fazli Bibi. Assalamu alaikum, Fazli Bibi. Fazli, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome to our program. Thank you. And we have also been joined by Councillor Dawn Barnes. Dawn, welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Very good. Well, let me start by asking you this question, Councillor Dawn Barnes. If you don't mind me calling you Dawn, what is the Lib Dems position on this? Obviously, our government has made some serious blunders lately. Metropolitan Police is refusing to say sorry after the way they handled the vigil. Had 10 officers arresting one woman, an armed woman, pinning her down to the ground. What's your view about all this?
Frankly, I think it's disgusting. The police were approached earlier in the week about the proposed vigil at Clapham Common, and asked if they would work with the organisers to make it COVID safe so that women and men could go along and make their feelings clear, have that moment to honour Sarah, but also to say that we need to reclaim our streets and they need to be safe for us. And it could have been COVID safe. There could have been time slots given, all kinds of things, but people have a right to mark that, to go to that vigil. And the police said, no, they wouldn't do it. And at the moment that the police said no, it was inevitable that some people would still want to go to Clapham Common and that something like this would happen. So Louisa Porritt, who's our mayoral candidate, had written to Cressida Dick to suggest that there was a discussion between the organising group and the Met Police, and that was declined. And now we are where we are. Not only that, but we saw scenes on Saturday of men jumping on, pushing women to the ground, arresting women in quite a violent manner. And given the circumstances and the reasons that people were there, that looked absolutely terrible for the Met Police.
But it looks like, Dawn, you want to have your cake and eat it. You want to be all safe and secure against COVID-19, but you also don't want the police officers to enforce the very law that we have enacted in our parliament.
But there was no need for them to enforce. If they'd agreed to work together with the organisers, they'd already said, the organisers had said that people would wear face masks and they'd be too.
No, the police officers said no to the demonstration. They said you can't have it.
They said no. They said
yes,
no.
So therefore, as citizens, we should listen to the police officers and not go to the demonstration.
That's never going to happen if you work.
It doesn't matter if it's not going to happen. It's like saying people are not going to obey the law.
Happen. It was inevitable that something like this would happen, that some people would feel they needed to go and mark that. And I myself went on a walk, a distance walk with other people where I live, because we chose not to travel to Clapham because we didn't want to go in public transport in the COVID circumstances. We didn't want to be in a big crowd, and we felt that we could do something distant. There was another vigil organised in another local park, which was also cancelled. But some people still went along, and the police didn't turn up at that, and there were no altercations. So I don't understand why we can organise something that was safe. It was last year now.
You're suggesting, Dawn, you're suggesting on a live TV program that we should be breaking the law. That's what you're saying.
No, not at all.
Yes,
what I'm saying is that where it is organised properly, then it would have.
No, but you can't have an organised event.
During the Black Lives Matter events last year, Chris Whitty had said that he didn't believe that the protests would result in spikes in COVID and that people were outside and they were wearing masks. I think if we can work together, we can continue to have the right to attend a vigil, to attend a protest, and work with the police so that it is socially distant or safely distant, because there's nothing social about this distancing, is there? Safely distant, and people have a right to travel to do that. It's absolutely fine for us to go for a walk in the park and keep our distance. Absolutely fine for me to go to my local park.
I find that very
Thousands
difficult.
Of people there. It is not impossible and not beyond.
Dawn, I find that very difficult, a very difficult logic to follow. But let me bring our other guest in. And I'm not opposing our rights to protest. I'm trying to understand, how do we do that while we also respect law? Now, Fajli Bibi, let me ask you this question, simple and straightforward. If the police officers or Metropolitan Police said to the Muslim community, you can't have a demonstration. If the Muslim community defied the Metropolitan Police's request not to have a demonstration, every single newspaper in this country, every single political parties would be condemning the Muslim community left, right, and center. Here we have women who are going out on a vigil, and now they're saying, well, police should not be telling us not to be having this kind of gathering. The police did, and you broke the law. And if police are arresting you, why are we screaming and why are we telling the police off now?
Well, it's not the organisers that actually broke the law. Organisers did put out in the media. I've seen it on the news or on Twitter that it has been cancelled. People made the choice to go out and pay a respect to someone who has actually shocked the whole country, because as a female, I feel scared of what's happened, and I feel vulnerable going out alone. And as an independent woman, I have to go out. But where does it leave us? Because we do rely on the police to keep us safe. But what has happened, a police officer has committed this crime. We're not blaming the police because of one officer.
Police
the whole
officer has been
isn't that.
sorry, 1 second, Fajli, for our legal purposes, we have to be very clear. A police officer has been accused of and charged, but the case hasn't been completed. We can't obviously talk much about it. Let's focus on your rights to demonstrate. Let's focus on my question, which is that did you, by going out by yourself, did you not break the law yourself?
People went out to pay respect. Now, you can word it how you want it. You can say they broke the law, or you can say they went to pay respect. And, you know, depends on what lens you're looking at it and whose perspective you're actually trying to bring forward. Because as a woman, they went to respect another woman who has been brutally killed. And the police should have respected the sentimental values of why they are actually there. But I don't know what happened, why they were so forceful on these women, but it didn't look very good when you watched it on the media.
Okay. Do you think the police officers should be given more power now by the government? Or are you saying police have already been rather brutal? We need to take more power away from them and put them under more scrutiny so we can bring checks and balances. Which one do you support?
They already have power. And when you say more power, if you're actually suggesting more power to do what they have done and what I have seen in the media, no, that's not what they did to some of those women and the way they were struggling for their life. I don't think that was right. Police are there to protect us, to respect people as well. And that wasn't respectful manner, the way they treated all those women. That's just my view.
Thank you. Over to you, Dawn. Dawn, do you think police have enough power or do they need more power? It's a parliamentary bill that's going through right now as we discuss. The proposal is going to embolden the police or empower them more to be able to cancel demonstrations or vigils. Don't forget about any more demonstrations.
No, I don't think they need any further power. We have a right as people who live in a democracy to attend vigils, to attend demonstrations. And you mentioned earlier that going to that one at Clapham Common, it couldn't have been possible to have achieved a safe one. Well, I don't believe that that's true for a moment. Just before Christmas, I went to a Hanukkah event that was organised by a local rabbi, and we all took tins of food to donate to a local food bank. It was safely distanced. There was tape on the floor, so we knew where to stand, not to mix. It was perfectly acceptable for us to go. There were traditional foods available for us.
But you can't, Dawn, you can't use this.
This was a vigil. This was a peaceful
vigil. No, Dawn, you can't keep on going back on it saying that people will be abiding by the law. They don't. That was only the other day we have had 2 weddings with 700 people happening in North London. Come on, we know people don't necessarily follow the law when a large number of people come together, when there is a lot of emotion. I've moved on from that conversation. I'm asking you, do you think police officers should have more power? And you've said no. Very clearly made. I understood. Let's actually address the issue that I wanted to raise, and it was raised by one of our guests earlier on. I think it was Mumtaz who said, why should I be scared of going out? Mumtaz, I want to give you the floor a little bit to explain this. How does it feel for you to know that the streets of our country are not safe for you as a woman? Mumtaz?
So look, you mentioned some statistics, and I also mentioned the statistic where one woman is killed every 3 days in the UK. How does that make me feel when I go out? As I said, as women, when we're going out, we think about where are we going to park our car? Which train are we going to get? How are we going to even dress? Me as a woman who wears hijab, I think about these things from a whole other perspective, as well as obviously the same perspective that other guests here will be thinking about it from. So no, it doesn't. I don't feel safe going out when I see these figures, but also when I see women around me talking about these issues, women around me saying, make sure you text me when you get home, and going back to what you said, I mean, look, Yes, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I do believe that people should follow the law. However, you know, a request was, the police knew that this video was going to happen. We don't live in a perfect society where the police will turn around and say no, and people say, okay, then we'll just leave it. We don't live in that perfect society. If we did, we wouldn't be having this debate, because in that society, everybody would feel safe. And as I said earlier, women, you know, they had all these emotions and these sentiments, and they have nowhere else to go with it, which is why they were out there. And, you know, I think given that the police knew about it, given what
No,
happened,
hang on a second. I think Mumtaz, can we backtrack a bit? Sorry to stop you. We've already discussed that. I'm asking more about how you feel as a woman. If you feel unsafe, and you've already said that you don't feel very, very safe, do you think it's the responsibility of men to make make our streets safer? Do you think, as men, we have failed our women in a miserable way? Let's ask that question to Solma. Solma, what's your view about safety of our women? They don't feel safe. They feel vulnerable. They have been violated, harassed on the street. Horror stories we've heard so far.
Sure. It's very sad. It's very sad that, you know, it's always the woman's fault for dressing or whatever. You know, it's always the woman who has to, you know, prove herself. And it's the men, you know, the figures, as there are stark figures, you know, already as mentioned. And why? Yeah, that's a big question. You know, why women have to protect themselves, and why women have to, you know, feel so unsafe going out. I've said earlier on, you know, my mother used to phone me every evening to make sure I've reached home. I now phone my daughter to make sure she's reached home. Why do we have to do that? You know, this is a country that we felt, you know, most outward-looking, forward-looking. We have achieved all these, you know, women's equality, you know, although hasn't gone far enough for me. But, you know, we talk about feminism and, you know, socialist feminism or whatever feminism, you know, and we thought, you know, wrongly, I think, we thought we had all those freedoms. But, you know, when you look at those figures, stark figures, and what happened to Sarah Everard was a wake-up call for men as well as women. Women, we need to stand up for our rights. We need to protest. This visual was our right, you know, whatever the circumstances was. And you know, it's really, we need to ask ourselves the question. Men need to ask, you know, men, you have, you know, mothers, you have daughters, you have sisters, you know, think of us like your mother, your daughter, your sisters. Then you will think, then you will respect women.
Okay, thank you. Let's go over to Dawn.
We've got to answer that question.
Thank you very much. Dawn, to you, sometimes I feel very sad and sickened to the core. Just thinking about this, I feel embarrassed to even call myself a man because of the actions and activities of some men who have objectified women, sexualized them, and the Guardian report on the YouGov outcome just made it more vivid and more stark for you. Do you feel safe on the streets of our country? Dawn?
Unfortunately, no, I don't. And I've had many incidences myself, or heard about them from friends and colleagues at work who've been touched on the bus or on the tube, who've been followed home, and who don't feel safe. You know, for them, fortunately, it hasn't got to murder. It hasn't got to worse, but actually to go out in the street. And we're not just talking about at night. We're talking about in the daytime. Time commute to work, it happens. There are comments made. It's endemic within our society. And these, you know, the comments are a stepping stone, and they're not picked up, and they're just made. And actually, you as a man, me as a woman, we can say, no, actually, that's not the right thing to say. That's not appropriate, and pull it up again and again until it sinks in. But the more that we objectify women, the more we let those comments go, the more it escalates and escalates. So it's upskirting the thing that was happening quite a lot on public transport, where men were filming under women's skirts while they're standing on public transport and sharing on social media, even doing whatever they do with a video like that. It's disgusting to think that if I wear a skirt on the tube going to work, you're at risk of some behavior like that. You may not even know it's happening. And then, of course, some men do touch you when you're on the tube, and it's not right. And that can escalate. And then we see what happens later. And we see women being followed home, and we see women being physically attacked or sexually attacked. And it may happen in the workplace, it may happen in the home, it may happen in the street, but it is not acceptable. And when you hear it as a man, you have every right to tell somebody that it's not appropriate, as much as a woman has that right.
And over to you, Fajli, do you think it's men's fault and it's their responsibility, men's fault for the way they behave towards women?
You know, the comment you made about you feel uncomfortable as a man, it's not every man. And I think we need to actually make that clear, that we're not tarnishing every man as bad. There are lots of men out there who are there protecting women and helping them as well. But in regards to the responsibilities of men, they really need to also stand up. And other women need to stand up. If you see incidents like that, like what you've just described, Dawn, other women need to stand up, other men need to stand up and say, what you're doing is wrong. But it's the society where everyone takes this in as silent. You'll see a lot of people see these incidents, but no one will actually go up and protect them. What is this society has become? I mean, if someone like me, I would actually go and actually challenge them, but I wouldn't have anyone. If something happened to me, there wouldn't be many people coming to save me or challenge the perpetrators. And it's a society we need to be more caring. Regardless of a man or woman, we all need to look after each other and care for each other and protect each other.
It is very sad for our society to stoop so low that we see women have to face this on a daily basis. Harassment on the street, being touched inappropriately in the public transport. I was listening to a radio program the other day when a woman was saying that there was a man looking at me, and I felt like he was undressing me with his eyes. It must be one of the most horrifying experiences to live through if men look at women like that. Now, I don't know what to say to those men who do that. I feel very sick to the core that men can look at women like this. And I 100% want to echo and say to men who are listening, you should listen to our guests here who are not only pleading that treat us like your mother, treat us like your sister, treat us like your daughter, have some respect. It's very sad that we have to talk about it. As we have to talk about it after we have lost one very precious life recently, but like Mumtaz said, a woman gets killed every 3 minutes somewhere in the world. It's far, it's not acceptable, it's not tolerable. So what do we do about it? We want to talk about the solutions when we come back after the break, but we do want to take your calls. If you've got any calls to make, if you want to share your thoughts, share your own experiences, or just ask a question, you can. We've got 4 amazing guests and they can answer them for you. And I'd really like to hear from women who are listening to our program, your views especially. I feel that we should have more of your views in our program so that we can deal with it. Yes, we're discussing police brutality, but the entire discussion has come about because of Sarah's murder. And of course, we are not doing enough to keep our streets safe. It's very sad. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break now. When I come back, ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk about the solutions that we could be exploring. What should we do as a community to make sure that the police don't have far too much power? And what do we do about politicians who think they can get away with whatever they want? And what do we do with men who mistreat their women? And how do we make sure our women are safe wherever they are? Don't go too far away. When I come back, I'll continue this conversation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back. We are talking about police brutality. But at the back of police brutality, what we have also realized is that men who have harassed women have also been brutal, haven't they? It's very sad, but it is true that those men, and I'm not saying all men, those men who look at women as objects of their sexual desire, who objectify women, who sexualize women, who harass women with their eyes, with their language, with their actions, I believe need to be challenged. They need to not only be challenged, but we need to eradicate this behavior from our society once and for all. But how do we do that? What steps do we need to take to do this? But before we do this discussion, I want to find out, how do we create some checks and balances against the law and order on one hand, and on the other side, our freedom to protest, our freedom to challenge, our freedom to congregate if we want to in a peaceful manner, and our freedom to challenge our government and not having the police officers with draconian powers to be able to do anything. How do we do that? So let's go back to our guests. The only elected politician we have is from the Lib Dems on our panel today, which is good, but it would have been good to have somebody from the Conservative Party and the Labour Party equally represent themselves with their views, so we could have made it more fair. But because we don't have anybody else and we only have one person, I'm going to ask you a more neutral question, Dawn, if you don't mind. How do you create that balance? On one hand, freedom and liberty, on the other hand, law and order. While you're thinking about the answer, I'm going to take a call in the meantime. So I've given you the question. You can start thinking about it if you don't mind. Let me take the call. A caller has been waiting for a long time. Hello, salaam alaikum, caller.
Wa alaikum salam. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah. How are you and how are all the guests? I hope they're fine, inshallah.
I'm fine. They're looking all good. What is your question, or what is your view?
It's not nothing much. First of all, I would like to start off by saying, may Sarah Everard, may she rest in peace, and for all the women who have lost their lives due to male violence, right? Unfortunately and shamefully, may they also rest in peace, and also the women who are suffering from male violence, right? May they also find peace and justice, inshallah. Yeah.
What should we do with those men? What should we do with those men?
Sorry?
What should we do with these men who behave like this?
If I was there, I can tell these four sisters here, including Dawn, she's my sister in humanity, and I have sisters like her, my family. I would tell them that if I was there next to them and one man was harassing them, even by verbally or by joke, I will say something. And I will, inshallah, I will defend them. Yeah? And I believe that there should be tougher punishments in the law, not just like a 1 year and do a 6 months prison and come out. There should be tougher laws, yeah, to protect women and girls, yeah. And my only thing is that I've been raised, alhamdulillah, by a single mom, right? She's in her 60s and she's got underlying health conditions. But what it is that my mom's a very strong woman, and she's taught me to respect everyone, and also especially women as well, because I have two sisters, alhamdulillah, and I've got nieces as well. I'm not married yet, but when it comes to protecting my family, yeah, and like I said, the woman, any woman, I just gave an example of the four women, but any woman, like my work colleagues, my friends, or anyone, I will inshallah try to protect them, and I will do anything. But when it comes to my sisters, I think that every man should think like that. That how would they feel that if a man was even like jokingly or sarcastically saying something to a woman inappropriately? If anything happens to I'm ready to die or to defend by going to jail for my family, for my mom, my sister, my nieces, and also my wife, my daughters when I get married. Yeah? And I support the vigil that took place. I wasn't there. But however, one thing is also there's many funerals that I couldn't attend as well. Yeah, even with social distancing, even with things, because from 2020 I lost so many family members and friends and through to COVID and other illnesses as well. But I couldn't attend because of the restrictions and because I thought that I'm going to be fine. So the police has always, not all of them, I've encountered a lot of good police officers or nice police officers, but at the same time, they're following laws and orders from the politicians who signed and approved, whether it's the Labour, Conservatives, or the Lib Dems. yeah, they've agreed that this is the lockdown rules. This is what's going to happen. So why should the police show empathy? I mean, I'm not saying that why should they. Sorry, what I'm trying to say is that why would you expect the police to show empathy while the politicians didn't show empathy at all, right? They didn't say okay, we don't agree with that. Do you understand? And
Okay,
also,
all right. I think you've made your point very clearly, and also then we need to put it into perspective. It's not all politicians. Some politicians are perhaps like that, but not all politicians. But thank you for that very good point. And I think I'd like to echo your sentiment that we should all be standing together and making sure we defend our sisters, our mothers, our wives, our female sisters in humanity, our sisters, simply, no matter what situation they're in, we should stand by them, especially if they're being harassed by anyone. So that's a very good, a powerful call from you. I'm very grateful. If anyone else wants to call, you're welcome to. We are open to your calls and your questions, but we are talking to our guests as well. So let me go back to Dawn. Dawn, you were earlier, I was questioning you earlier on. I raised a question to you. Would you like to answer that?
You're asking me about how do we balance the rights to protest and having the police there to keep us safe.
Correct.
That we take a sensible approach, and there are a lot of protests that go off very peacefully in this country. I'll refer to the Brexit marches, for example, which mainly were marches of perhaps over 1 million people in some circumstances, and there were no or very few violent incidents there. You didn't see the police necessarily having to manhandle people, and it is perfectly possible for us to do that. So the police do need to be there to protect and to look after us. I think the Black Lives Matter vigils and people taking the knee last year, again, there was not very often, I can't think, police interference as we saw on Saturday evening, and people were permitted to go and to be distant, but to voice their opinions. And I think that's important. And there were, as I said, there were vigils across the UK on Saturday night, and yet there's only one that made the television. There's only one where the police were shown to be manhandling, for want of a better word, those women. And it's very strange that it's just the one place. And I think that decision was taken earlier in the week and it was inevitable. But generally in this country, you can protest, and we don't see huge police action very often. And when we do, it makes the news, because it is big news, because it doesn't happen regularly, because quite often we do manage to have peaceful protests. And that's what we need to continue to have, because otherwise governments will do exactly what they want. And we do not want to be in that situation. We know a lot of other countries in the world that we can think of where we've got friends and they don't have the same rights to protest that we have here.
Do you think when police officers are wearing their uniform, the power gets to their head, or at least some police officers, and then they start behaving badly?
I think it's important that you say some police officers there. It's the same as it's some misbehave. It's perhaps some police officers that get carried away in the moment. It's not a majority, and I would never say that. They're quite hands-off, and they let people express their opinions. If somebody does get violent toward another protester, or you get factions of different protesters, then the police will step in, and that's what they're there for. But if everybody is in agreement and they're being peaceful, there shouldn't be a need for the police to have to step in.
Okay, let's go back to another caller. Hello, caller, are you still online?
Yes, I'm here, Ajmal.
Go ahead. What question do you have?
I have a question for the respected guest. Like you, I'm a father of a son and a daughter, and I've also got an elderly father. And I want the streets to be safe for every human. I mean, the discussion at the moment is around the streets being safe for women at night. But we all know, if we've got kids, our streets aren't safe for our children during the day. So we should be looking at policing for everybody. If we are tackling this, and to do it properly, to be honest, we've got to be looking at educating everybody to actually protect the most vulnerable in our society. You know, there are members of our society who can't actually communicate, can't socialise. They're kept indoors because their parents feel that if
can I ask you a question? I know you've raised a very important point, but I can't stop myself. But you're a father, right?
Yes.
How old are your children?
My daughter's just turned 21 and my son's 12.
Okay. Do you think computer games, violent films, and pornography have played a crucial role in objectifying women and normalizing bad behavior amongst boys and girls?
I'd continue on there to say there's a culture out there that actually glamorizes this violence. And that's never ever been tackled. There is, I mean, even some of the music that there's, a generation listen to, there's a lot of violence there in the images they're seeing. Not respectable to men or women, to be honest, I would say. And the barriers are being pushed out so much that the mixed messages are going out. The same channels that are showing the women actually holding a vigil are showing the same kind of images that many members of the community will find the behaviour expressed in the dramas, for example, or the programmes, as being also offensive, just like the offensive behaviour that's going on with these sexual predators that are out on our streets and in our communities.
What's your question then? Go ahead. Ask your question so that we can get it to the guests.
The question is obviously, as women and as parents, do you feel the streets are safe for our children during the day, and not just for men and women during the night?
Thank you. Let's ask that question to our guests. But thank you for that very good question that you've raised. I've got one more caller waiting. I'm going to come back to that caller. But going over to Mumtaz. Mumtaz, to you, a simple question. Do you think, and I'll give you the context, I took my children the other day to, before COVID-19 restrictions, so it was a year ago, I took them to Oxford Street to a clothes shop. And inside the clothes store was a massive TV screen at the entrance, and the same screen was placed in different parts of the clothes store. And the clothes store was showing on that screen a particular music dance and music scene, where they were talking very filthy, they were very violent in their language, very sexual in their behavior, and most of them were almost naked, very, very little on. And I felt very embarrassed walking into the store. Within 2 minutes, my son said, "Daddy, I don't like this. How can we get out?" So we left. Now, this has been thrust on our faces. And now we are wondering, why do our society objectify each other, not just men objectifying women, but women objectifying men, or condoning violence or glamorizing violence or anything like that? Is there something, is there a systemic problem in our attitude that is causing this rot to take so deep root in our society? Over to you, Mumtaz.
Ajmal, you say it's a simple question, but that's actually a very, very complex and complicated question. And, you're making some correlations, rightfully, between the maybe the over-sexualization of women and attacks on women. And I'm not really sure that I'm completely comfortable with that kind of correlation. You know what? We are in a society where we have to balance what somebody else, person A thinks is okay, with what person B thinks is okay, with what person C thinks is okay. We are never going to hit that perfect balance. And,
Mumtaz, if my 12-year-old boy says, "Daddy, I don't like this. What they're showing on that screen, I don't like the depiction of women. I don't like the song that they're displaying." I didn't say a single word. My son said, "I don't like it, Daddy, can we get out?" Something has seriously gone wrong in our society if that's what we're teaching our kids. Not only that, our children are busy playing extremely violent games in their computers at home. Our children are exposed to 24/7 TV dramas and films that depict both man and woman as their objects of desire. Where do we teach our children respect?
Well, this would be my question to you. Where does the responsibility start? Who does the responsibility predominantly and primarily rest with? You know,
I'd like to say parents.
Society? Is it with teachers? Is it with our politicians? You know, and it's really commendable that actually your 12-year-old son was able to say those things and that he felt comfortable saying those things. So I'm sure that's, you know, kudos to yourself and to your wife. But, you know, we have to ask that question, where does the responsibility rest? And you throughout this debate, you've asked a few times, are men to blame, you know. These are very complex and serious issues which require a complex and nuanced approach and response. And we can't say it's this one thing or it's this one section of society that has responsibility. It's a collective approach. And part of that collective approach is making women's safety part of the national debate, part of the national agenda at all times, in all spaces of power and influence, you know, where women are being represented, where women feel that they can speak freely, and you know that it's not an add-on to other policies, and it's not just comes to the forefront when something shocking like this happens. So, you know, we have to take a much more nuanced approach to we have to depoliticize the issue. You know,
it's going to be difficult. It's going to be very difficult. I can understand. Yeah. And I either have that challenge every day with my children because I have to almost deprogram them every time they come back from outside, sit down with them, listen to what they've experienced, try and synthesize or find ways of managing their life. But not every parent will have that capacity or the time or perhaps the option because they may be just managing hand-to-mouth existence. Let me go to our Solma, who has been sitting there quietly listening to our conversation. Solma, how do we solve this problem? What's your solution to all of these complex problems that we are facing at the moment?
Problems are very, very complex. And I think that Sarah Everard's murder sort of is a wake-up call for men and women, you know, to look at this issue seriously, because it's been going on for a long time, this objectifying of women and this violence against women. You know, I told you I worked with women suffering domestic violence 20 years ago, and I remember, you know, when I raised that issue of domestic violence in my community, you know, I wasn't very much welcomed by men. You know, I couldn't have that conversation with our men politicians. Some men politicians actually started abusing me and calling me at home for protecting their wives and daughters. So you know, I have seen all of that. You know, all of that, what it is like for women to suffer violence, and it's a wake-up call for men, I would say, primarily right now, starting with the policemen, you know, the way they handle the whole clap-up issues. You know, we don't want to go back to that again. Okay. But you know, women, it's not women who has to put this right. It's the men who has to put this right. They need to educate themselves. They need to educate their sons and show a bit of respect. And I would say we need to work together. It is a huge issue. It is a complex issue. But during those complexity, you know, the whole bill, the police crime and sentencing bill, has come at the wrong time. Because that bill is showing us there's a crackdown on our liberty. So you know, we've got this issue, one issue going on there, you know, how we are cracked down on our liberty and freedom and democracy. And the other issue we are facing, challenging, you know, how women are treated in society. And it's the men who needs to take responsibility, I would say.
Thank you. Very loud and clear. Men are responsible and then need to take the responsibility. Let me see, my other caller is still waiting. Is my caller still waiting there? Assalamu alaikum, caller. No, I think I've lost my caller. Sorry. Do apologize if I've kept the caller waiting for too long. Forgive me. You can come back and talk to me if you want. Over to you now. Firstly, for your views about this, what's your solution to this problem? And if you could make it quick because we're running out of time.
I think the solution is we already have policy, but there needs to be stricter rules on punishing the perpetrators, because so many people are getting away with it, and we need to stop that. We need people to have the capacity to report this whenever they see anything like that injustice happening to women or anyone. They need to actually report this to the police, and police needs to take actions rather than like I know police have a lot of responsibilities, but this is something they need to prioritize. And I feel the government need to make sure that they give more funding to the police officers, or have teams that are responsible for helping these vulnerable victims out there. Because I always hear, oh, I don't think we've got the resources to take this on, or actually let's close the case. But it's not just about closing a case, it's also about addressing the issues that's out there. So we need more strict rules on how these perpetrators are being punished, and also make examples of those as well. Because if we don't show to the world that this is what's going to happen to you if you commit this crime, then others won't learn from it as well.
So stronger education to our families is one, education to our boys. Second one is stronger punishment so that they understand that the consequences will be dire. And last one from Dawn, do you have one other solution? And I'm afraid you've got 30 seconds to make your point, Dawn.
I think one of the things we need to look at is the way that our streets are designed, and they need to be safe for women. If they're safe for women, they're likely also to be safer for children. And if they're safe for women and children, they'll be safe for men too. So there's a lot to be done about the way our streets are designed and how we get from A to B.
Thank you very much, ladies, for your amazing contribution. It is a complex issue. We all have our rights and liberties to protect, but we also have our laws to uphold, and we need to keep a balance. But what's most important is that we as a society, we as individuals in this society, we need to stand together to protect one another. And I'm very saddened to hear the degradation, the harassment of women on a regular basis. We need to make that unfashionable, unacceptable, intolerable, and we need to bring in a cultural change and a shift so that we don't see this ever happen again to anyone. We won't tolerate that if it was to happen to any of our own children. If somebody did that to my daughter, God only knows what I would do to that person. So I don't, obviously, I don't understand why some men think it's acceptable to have that kind of a nasty, disgusting, sexualized, degrading, filthy banter about women. It's not acceptable. It is not acceptable, and never it is acceptable. Ladies and gentlemen, with these words, I'd like to finish, and I'd like to thank you all for watching our program. And until next time, from myself, my guests, and my team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.